I'm back home and I'm in my, what I hope is a reasonably good reproduction of an 18th century blacksmith shop. And I didn't do this without a lot of counsel. A couple of really good blacksmiths in Ontario, Chris Johnson and Bo Beckett, they give me a lot of advice. Bo was actually here for part of the construction of the building. We did a film session here where we made pipe tomahawk axes tomahawks out of gun barrels. And that was a fantastic learning experience for me. But the fellow I'm going to introduce next, well, if you're familiar with the smell of black powder burning, or you have a passion for early American history, he doesn't need much of an introduction. So it's Simeon England. And you know, I aspire when I see the works of some people, and there's a saying that the crafts of today are the artifacts of tomorrow. And I'm making some crafts, but Simeon, the way I look at some of his work, they're already artifacts. they're really good representations of the tools and the weapons used in the time period that we portray. And I was lucky to get him to do an interview with me in a working blacksmith shop at Prickett Fort. And yeah, I'm about to share that with you. Hope you enjoy. Okay, so we are here at Prickett Fort, and with my friend Simeon England again, and it is once again a pleasure, and he's a blacksmith, because that's a grip. Yeah, you pound some steel. Anyway, Simeon gave a great presentation yesterday at the School of the Longhunter, and I got to tell you, Simeon, from the get-go, I look up at you and you get this great big grin on your face, and your enthusiasm that you like educating. You like teaching people about the research you've done. And
I really do. It's such a pleasure. I mean, I think most of us that do this stuff, we enjoy the story. And so that's what we're doing when we dress up, is we're telling a story to either it's to us. You know, I could simply, if I'm out hunting, I may be telling the story to me. It's just me. But if I'm at an event, we all may be telling the same story. And then if you're at an event, you're demonstrating, you're telling the story to other people.
Right. You got to tell the story about your granddad's shaving.
Okay.
Draw knife. I found that a grand story.
It's one of my favorites. My dad had a wood shop in the basement, and you know, I'm about 6 years old, somewhere around there. My grandpa died before I was 6. He was born in 1898. He never had running water in the house. You know, typical. But I found that draw knife in my dad's wood shop. And I said, "What is this?" And he said, "Well, that was your grandpa's draw knife." And I said, "Well, how do you use it?" You know, because I'm sitting there holding it, and he put a 2x6 up in a little vise and angled it down so I could, and he started to shave. And so he handed it to me, and I whittled the soup out of that thing. Yeah. And but I was connecting with Grandpa's tool. I could feel his thumbprints in the handle. And I still got the draw knife and the what's left of the 2x6.
You kept
it all.
The chunk of wood?
Yep.
And now you, well, I look at some of the stuff you do, and you're an inspiration for me, but so you're using that on your guns still, are you, and some of your other tools?
I just used the draw knife on the Tomahawk that I'm carrying today. Yeah.
Could we have a look at it?
Sure, yeah.
Because I thought maybe today, Simeon, we might get into, not the presentation you did that yesterday, but that's fresh in my mind, but I'm an old fella. And I forget last season's, which I was here for the show last year, and you started to talk about the role of the blacksmith on the frontier. And I found that absolutely fascinating, because we have all these misconceptions of what, you know, we're in this fabulous recreation of an 18th century blacksmith shop. But I got a visualization of Daniel Boone crossing through the Cumberland Gap, and they weren't carrying this.
Yeah.
So maybe you could elaborate a bit on your presentation from last year and dispel some of those myths.
Okay. Well, the frontier, you know, Boonesboro has a blacksmith shop with Squire there. He sets up his gunsmith shop, because we know a Dutchman, it's written down in history that a Dutchman during the siege is hiding in one of the cabins with the women, and they discover him and shoo him out forcefully to tell him to go fight with the men, basically, and they record that he goes and hides behind the bellows in the shop. So we know right where
one.
Yeah, Yeah, we know it was there, and by the drawing too, that Squire was building, repairing, things like that, guns there at least.
Yeah.
We know at Fort Loudon, Tennessee, that the blacksmith shop was the first building that they erected.
Essential.
Yes.
Right? Essential.
Yeah.
But they weren't, people have this impression that this blacksmith in the remote corners of the frontier was making gun locks from start to scratch. And I mean, today we might think of that as a primitive mechanism, but in that time frame, it was one of the most complicated mechanical devices made. They weren't actually making the actual locks from scratch at that time, were they?
Probably way less than what we think about. What especially on the frontier, you have to consider the raw material. Where are they getting the raw material? And it has to be basically shipped in or carted in, you know. And so if they're getting small stuff, that's the kind of things that they can maybe make a cock for a lock, or which would be the modern day hammer. They can make the parts, things like that. But that's a repair job.
Yeah.
You know, so if an axe breaks, they might be able to scab something on the side, weld it together, you know, put it down the road, hinges, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know I've tried to make an example that comes to mind for me. I've attempted to make a couple of files in my blacksmith shop, and they're pretty crude. And I'm thinking they might have, if they needed to, they would have, but a lot of those things were brought in, right?
Yes.
Like
yeah.
tools from
files
bigger centers.
Files they're pretty much getting shipped in from Europe. Yeah, yeah, and even a lot of the steel. I mean, we're not making steel here. We're shipping it over to England. They're putting carbon into it. They know how to do it. We don't know how to do it for a while yet.
Quite a few years.
Yeah.
And then getting it back.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I recall from your presentation, and again, getting back to materials available. And we look at your hat or tomahawk, the smallness of it, right? First of all, you could dispel the myth that was used for chopping wood. Perhaps kindling, but what was its sole purpose or main purpose?
That's a fighting weapon.
Yeah, and they pretty much all carried them, didn't they?
If you're in the backcountry and further out on the frontier, you have a tomahawk. It's almost, unless you've lost it or you're looking for one or you're going to buy one, you've probably got one. Militia law requires, and it requires different things for different areas, but it requires you to have all of your fighting weapons. So your gun, powder, lead to shoot, because you're in the Army. It'll require you to have a knife. Sometimes it'll say a tomahawk or a bayonet or a sword. Yeah, but you're in the Army at 16 years old, all the way up to 60.
Thinking I'm older than dirt, I'd probably still be in it.
I'm sure they wouldn't turn you down.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I find that fascinating, Simeon. And maybe we could talk a bit about tools too. I know you earlier, I guess it was last year, we had a chat, but we were talking about anvils. And this one over your left shoulder, that's sort of a reproduction of one from that time period, isn't it?
And that's a great size too. And you're talking about early shops, you know, on the frontier. This isn't coming over on a horse. You know, they're using something like this, a stake anvil, something much smaller that they can haul this part on a horse.
Right.
They can cut their own stump, but this is much easier to get in. Later on, when there's wagons and it's more peaceful, maybe you get something like that.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be that'd put a smile on the blacksmith?
That would be a
wouldn't
big
it, when
improvement.
that rolled in off the wagon?
Yeah, I'm smiling just thinking about it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And this one, let's see if we can get it in the picture over here. We have an anvil like I'm sure you have in your shop and I have in mine. That would be something they didn't have at that time. They didn't have anvils of that size.
Correct. Yeah, that would be, you know, big industry. And that's probably Europe where they're turning pig iron into wrought iron. I mean that term wrought means to have been worked. So they're taking that iron and mashing it down on big water wheel hammers that are pounding. That's your power hammer, and that's turning the big chunks of iron into iron that's usable that we can use.
Right. The other thing, and I do a little bit of blacksmithing. You're my inspiration, by the way. I aspire. But you think at the time period, they, like you and I, I'm sure you use stock material, but they're starting from a chunk of wrought iron. Like, you're going to make a screw, they got to work it down to the diameter of the screw first, and then they're going to get out their hand files, and they're going to file the threads in.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, an avid living historian, was making a screw one day, and he was at this vise in his shop, and he was filing threads in it. And his neighbor dropped in. He says, "What the heck you doing?" He says, "Well, we're making a screw." And he said, "You know, you can go to the corner store and buy them by the gross." But for him, he does everything as close to the ways that we're done. Scratch builds guns, including barrels and locks, and crazy guy. But this shop, I recently built or tried to recreate an 18th century blacksmith shop, but it doesn't have mandrels and all the tools. This looks like it would be a fascinating shop to work in.
Yours is more of a frontier shop. This is more of a shop once an area has been established. But it's a great reproduction. You have two forges. You have a big bellows on each side. So. It's a really good, and of course your post vise that are sitting there. This is really set up nice to where the forge, the anvil, the big post vise, and of course your water trough too. So
one turn from the fire to the anvil.
Yeah.
One step to the post vise.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
You know, a lot of people think when they think of a blacksmith, they think of one guy working in a shop by himself, and typically, if he's an established blacksmith and it's an established shop, there's a few guys in here striking for him. Yeah, because if you have let's say it's 1 1/4 inch square chunk of wrought iron, and you need to forge it down into that hinge, you probably got 2 guys striking with you with big hammers, and you're directing them where to hit.
I can relate to the mundane aspect of that, because if we think of the apprenticeship program that they would have had at that time period, I built a settler's cabin. I decided I'm going to build every nail, and it's cedar shaped, so there's 2 nails per shake, and there's, I forget, 3,600 shakes, plus the floorboards, plus the veranda. So I started making them. I made about 600 or 700, and I thought, this is getting old.
Yeah.
I went down to the corner store and bought it by the gross after that, but I did finish the cabin. You wouldn't know, but I kind of hated to do that, but I was to the point of looking at my birth certificate, so I thought.
Yes, along with your nail example is chain, and a really good thing that an apprentice would be doing. These aren't welded, but he would have been doing these too. But if a chain link is welded together, every link has a weld in it, and so that apprentice is learning
Every
time.
single link.
You know, he may go from nail to making chain, but he's doing that repetitive over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's grand. Yeah, I guess, Simeon, I'd also like to ask, like, the tools that you make, and your gun is a fine example, but I'm holding one as well, is you've had an opportunity to not just research in paper and archives and what have you, but you've actually handled a number of original pieces. So maybe you could elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, hundreds. A lot of the work that I do is behind the scenes. Nobody sees it until they see the work. So the research to me is just as fun as building the object. So I've got all of the Tomahawk books that have a significant amount of tomahawks in them, and then some that only have 1 or 2 in there, just for a visual example of what I'm looking for.
So you go to museums and they give you access to their pieces?
That's correct. I've been in collectors' homes. I go to shows that's just collectors.
Yeah.
So
measure, photograph, document.
Yes.
Good stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, developing the relationship with the collector is a special thing, because they have a passion for that piece just like I do. you know, but it's a little bit different. They want that thing to tell a story too, and I do too. You know,
Absolutely.
so I'm very careful. I don't reproduce exactly something that a collector has. I put it in my field of study. If they tell me you can reproduce this, then that's another thing. But you don't want to reproduce something that the collector has unless he knows about it. So you've always got to keep that line of communication going.
Yeah, that's grand. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. The other thing I've made a few. Made my first pipe tomahawk. Rather proud of it. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's a start. I learned a lot in the construction of it. But I get people talking. You know, it's got the draft in it for the smoking aspect of it, and people go, "Well, that must be really frail." And I'm going, I'm not thinking. Maybe you could address that. Like some people would look at that and say, "Well, what kind of a weapon is that? That's got to be darn useless." But we know different.
We know different, yeah, and we do make them today out of curly maple because that's a pretty handle, and some of them were made out of that too because the gunsmith was making the fancy pipe tomahawks. He's embellishing, he's doing the engraving, the inlay, you know, the silver work, all of that stuff. The gunsmith can do that. He has the tools to be able to bore that hole, that kind of thing. But the mass-produced ones are probably more big shop made. But what all of them are made for is to put a hole in your head and steal your tobacco and smoke it out of your dead body. You know, over your dead body. That's what it's for. They're a smoking weapon. All they've done is taken a weapon and made it something that you can also smoke from.
And it's not just that side that's the weapon part. I know that I've read the account of Simon Kenton when he passed away. He had a couple of indentations in his head from the pipe. It wasn't a tomahawk, but a pipe end of the...
Yeah, he was escaping from captivity, and an Indian ran up on a horse and clocked him in the head with the pole end, with the bowl.
Yeah, must have been one tough sucker. This looks like maybe hickory?
That's hickory, yes.
Hickory, yeah. That would make a strong shaft.
Yes.
Yeah. I suspect they were probably used for light camp chores, you know, maybe a little kindling, something like that, but they certainly wouldn't try to split firewood with it.
That's right. I tell people meat and bone. You know, if you want to butcher an elk, a buffalo, that'll cut all the bone that you need it to.
Yeah.
That'll get the meat out.
Well, up in my part of the world, we hunt moose, and I always carry a small cutting tool similar to this. You can quarter it. If you got to bring a moose quarter, and you're a couple of miles back in the bush, this is a fine tool
Pretty
to have.
handy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Daniel Tribune writes in his journal that he's leaving Logan Station, which is Middle Kentucky, and that's one of the first 3 forts in Kentucky. He's going back through the gap into Virginia, and it's wintertime. And he says, there's 3 of them. He says, we each have a horse, a gun, and a tomahawk. He calls them tomahawks. He writes phonetically. It's perfect. Yeah. And he says that the people of the fort think we're going to perish because we have no big axe to chop firewood. So he's saying that they each had their weapon.
They weren't going to use it.
They were not, and everybody there knew that they were not going to be using it to chop firewood.
Don't you love finding those tidbits?
Yes.
Like when we're doing our research, it's a passion for me as well. And every once in a while, sometimes you got to extrapolate like you've done, but you figured it out just by the wording that no, they weren't going to cut firewood.
Yes.
They were going to kill somebody.
And the extant examples. I mean, these things. Some of them. This is very right on with the size of what some of them were. This is on the smaller side and on the lighter side, but it's very much right on. And when you pick one of these up, and then you go think of even chopping down a tree, could you chop down a tree that size? You could.
Take a spell.
But if you have an axe, why?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you'd use it for that. The balance of this is absolutely amazing. Is that 18-inch shaft, roughly? Maybe 20?
I can tell you. About 19.
True blacksmith right there. Well, Simeon, maybe I should pull the plug on this and go back to school. I might end up with a detention of some kind.
Oh boy, we
end
don't
up in
want
the
that.
principal's office.
Yeah, I don't need
Wouldn't
that
want
again.
that. You wouldn't want it.
Not again.
I can tell. This is only my 2nd year here, and I can't believe I wasn't coming here years ago. It's a fabulous facility, great staff, great educators. Like you can't not come to the school of Longhunter and not learn.
this is the 30th year. Anytime that you have an event that's running for 30 years, you know, it's successful.
Right.
So they do a great job. The site is great. The administrators are great. The people that put on the site on this event are great.
Speaking of dispelling myths, that dispels that myth or that old saying that things today don't last 30 years. I think we're good.
It's lasted the test of time.
I appreciate it.
It's a
Simeon.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.